Hi there everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought I would do a short video on using iterations to make a pattern. And so I'll just show you, I've got this pattern here. It's a photo of my chair. It's a pattern that I found around the house, and I'm going to have a look at how I can recreate this pattern today. I've got it open in Photoshop here so that I can get the colors from it when I want to, but we're not there yet. So I'll start off by creating a new P5js file, a sketch in the web editor. And you can see it's creating a canvas of 400 by 400 in the setup section, and this just runs once. And then in my draw section, we've got a background at the moment of 220, which will be some kind of grey. So if I play that, you can see I've got a 400 pixel by 400 pixel square with a grey background. So for starters, I am going to change the background color because you can see I've got this nice blue in here. I'm going to use Photoshop because I want to get this exact color. So using the color picker, I can choose this color, and I'll just click and let's have a look. So when we talk about different color values, and you've probably seen this before in Photoshop or whatever software you're using to do digital works, there's a few different ways that colors can be represented. Here at the top we've got HSB, which is hue, saturation and brightness. We'll look at that later on because you can use this color space in P5js. But for now we'll stick with RGB, which is the default color settings. And so you can see here my red value in this color is 0, my green is 94, and my blue is 182. So I'll just copy these 0, 94, 182. Let's jump back over here. So instead of 220, if you've just got one number in the background color, it's going to give you a grayscale range. So for example, if I put in 0 and refresh, it's black. If I put in 255, which is the highest value you can have when it comes to colors, it's white. Otherwise, I can put in 3 numbers here with separated by commas, and that will let me specify red, green and blue values. So I just have to remember what that was. So 0, 94, 182. So 0, 94, 182. Okay, now let's play that, and I should have, yep, there's my blue. Alright, so that's just getting started. I'm trying to get the look and feel of the pattern that I'm copying. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off just by drawing the ellipse shape. You can see this shape that's here in my... So something that's sort of representative of this circle shape here, or ellipse, oval. So now to do that, I create an ellipse using the ellipse function. So, oops. And so when you draw an ellipse, you specify the x value, the y value, and then the width and the height. So I'm just going to start by putting it at 0, 0, so it's in the top right corner, and I'm going to give it, just have a go, maybe a width of 30. So one thing is, if you only specify one number here, it will use that number for both the width and the height, and you'll get a perfect circle. So you can see here I have a circle, and I'll talk about this positioning of it in a second. You kind of can't see properly actually because it's off in the corner here. So that the way that it positions your ellipse is that it's using the center of the ellipse as an anchor point. So knowing that the width of mine is 30, if I put in here for the position, if I put 30 and 30 and press play again, right, you can see here it is in the center. If I wanted to butt it up against the edge, I would halve this number and put 15, 15. Oops. Okay, so I am looking to have an oval rather than a circle, so I'm going to add a second value in here and just sort of try some values and see. Maybe I'll make this like 28. Yeah, I like that shape. I'm going to position it a bit better in a moment. I want it maybe 10 in from the edge and 10 in from the top, so I'll halve 28, which is 14, and then I'll add 10. And I'll demonstrate my thinking here, so put auto refresh on. If I was to just put 14, this would put it right at the edge. Same if I was to put half of 45, which I think I can put decimal points here. Let's find out, which is what, 22.5? Yep, you can put decimal points. It's right on the very edge here. I want to add another 10 to each of these just to bring it in 10 from the left and 10 from the top. So let's go 24 and 32.5 from the top. So there we go. I'm actually, just for ease, I'm going to change this to 33 and I'm going to make my height 46, just so I'm playing with round numbers rather than getting decimal points in there. I'm not getting an error here, but you should remember to put the semicolon at the end of your line. Okay, so this shape is, yeah, it's roughly the shape I want. I could go have a look. Yeah, this will do for now. So I have one shape. Let's look at the color of it now. So I will go back to Photoshop and I'll take my color picker and I'll choose one of these darker blues. If I want to change the color of the ellipse, you can set that by setting the stroke and the fill. As you may have used Illustrator before, the stroke is the line around the outside of a shape and the fill is the color, actual color of the shape. So I don't want any stroke. Normally you could set the stroke color just by using the stroke function and putting a color in here. So I could put stroke 99. And I've got this grey stroke happening here. If you don't want to have any stroke color at all, I'm just going to turn off auto refresh for a second. So if you don't want any color for the stroke or no stroke at all, you use the no stroke command, and you still need to put these brackets even though they don't contain anything. No stroke with the brackets, and all of these other commands are called functions, and they can have different parameters that you can send to them. For stroke, for no stroke, we just don't want stroke, so we don't have any parameters to put in. And you can see now I've got this circle with no stroke. I now want to set my fill color. If I wanted a stroke and no fill, I could use no fill. I'll just show you that that exists. That's going to make everything disappear. I'll just comment out no stroke for a second so you can see I could, if I wanted to, get a stroke with no fill. Note that when I put 2 slashes at the front of the line, it turns it into a comment, so that means it doesn't get actioned by the program, but it's there for you to read, and this is often a really good way to keep notes in your program to remind yourself what something was. But in my case, I want the fill, and I do not want the stroke, so let's do that, and here we go. So I would like this sort of darker blue for my fill, so I'll set the fill and I'll jump back over to Photoshop and 142.86. So 1,42,86. now I have this sort of darker blue going on here. Anytime you set a color, we were using the R, G and B value, red, green and blue. There is also the option if you want to add an alpha value at the end of that. So if you want something that's going to be see-through, again, it's not going to make much difference just yet. Yeah, you can set the alpha value here, and I think you set it, let's just try this. If I set it to 0, it will disappear because it has no, it's completely transparent. If I set it to 1, it's still nothing. So yeah, this goes from 0 to 255. So if I set it to 120, I'll have about half the opacity here. So that's just to show you as an example. We'll be using that later on, so don't worry too much about that. Okay, so I've got my first ellipse here. There's another function I'm going to show you called ellipse mode. So right now the ellipse is being set with the anchor point as its center. Ellipse mode gives you a few other options for how the circle's drawn. And this could be useful if you don't want to have to sort of calculate centers all the time. By default, so to change the ellipse mode, we use the ellipse mode function. By default, the ellipse mode is set to center, and that needs to be in all caps. And if I was to play that, nothing's going to happen because it's already set to center. The other options for ellipse mode, and I'm just going to bring up the, let's just go to p5js.org and have a look at the documentation. So all of the functions, their information is in the reference section. You can search the reference section, and if I just search ellipse, you can see there's a few things here. Let's see what ellipse mode does. So ellipse mode by default is the center. The other option you can use is radius. So radius works in a similar way to center in that the first two parameters set the x and y value of the middle. But with radius, the next two values set the radial width and the radial height. So that's going to be half the height and half the width. So let's just change this and let's see what it does. So you can see here that my ellipse is now double the size because half of its width is 28 and half of its height is 46. Okay, so another mode that we can set here is corner. And when you use corner, the x and y values are set to the corner of the circle or the ellipse. So of course an ellipse doesn't have a top corner, but it's the corner of its bounding box. So if you imagine sort of a rectangle drawn around this, and that's what it's being drawn inside of, this top left corner here is where that's set. And maybe we can better demonstrate that by setting this back to 0 and 0. So the x and y values of where it's placed are in the top corner here. Just one other thing to note, and let's have a look at this. So if we want to look at the grid system that comes with, that is how, like the coordinate system that P5js uses, is the top left corner is 0x and 0y, and as we move along to the right the number goes up to whatever size your canvas is set to, and same with you move downwards, you count up. So on my canvas, which is 400 by 400, this bottom corner here would be 400 and 400. Okay. So that's corner mode, and that might be a more intuitive way for you to think about this. It has its uses. By default, it's not set to use this. The next mode is corners with an S. And let's see what happens here. At the moment, that looks identical. And the reason for that is the corners mode sets the first two values are the x and y values of this corners of the top left corner of the bounding box of the ellipse. Whereas the second two are the x and y value of the bottom right bounding box. And so let's just change this. So if I set this to 400 by 400, I'm going to get an ellipse that takes up the whole of my screen, or a circle. If I set this to 400 by 300, so this 0, 0 is my first value because it's setting the top corner up here, and 400 by 300 is my bottom. We're not going to use this ellipse mode for now, so I'm going to delete it. Actually, I'm just going to undo so I can get my size back that I liked. And let's play that now, and we're back to my thing off in the corner. So I'll move it to 14 from the left and 33 down. And let's play that. Oh wait, 24, because I want a 10 border. Okay, so last week we had a look at iterations. To iterate something means to repeat it, to make many versions of it. What I want to do is I want my pattern to fill this cube. And so let's just have a look at iterations to do that. So to do iterations, you use a for loop. For loop is sort of a counter, and it's something we're going to be using again and again in programming. So even if you don't wrap your head around it straight away, if you keep using it, it's going to start to make sense. So the first thing we need to do is we need to type for, not in capitals. Then we need to open some brackets because this is our condition that we're setting. The way iterations work is you use a variable, which is a way to store a number. We're going to call this I, and you could call this anything, but like generally when you're iterating, you use the variable called I. So we set up the variable first. So we say I equals 0. And then we put a semicolon because we're going to do the next thing. So our first thing we're doing is we're initializing this variable by saying it equals 0. The next thing we want to do is we want to test a condition. So we want to find out if something is true or false, and depending on if it's true or false will mean if we do the next thing or not. So I want to say that while I is less than 400, and I'm choosing 400 because that's the width of my canvas. So as long as I is less than the width of my canvas, it's going to keep doing the next thing. I need to put a semicolon to say that that part of it has finished. You can put spaces in here, it doesn't really matter. And the next thing I want to do is I want to update. So if this condition is met, if I is less than 400, I want to add, so I'm going to start by moving this across the screen. So I want to add the width of my ellipse, which my ellipse is 28 wide. So I'm going to say I is plus equal to, so that means add it to the value. It's plus equal to 28. So this is the first part of my for statement. I now need to say, create a statement within this. So I have to open and close a set of curly brackets. And whatever I put inside these brackets here, it's going to keep happening. It's going to keep doing this thing until this condition here is met. So instead of my drawing my ellipse up here, I'm just going to cut it and I'm going to put it here inside my for statement. And what this should do is draw my ellipses all across the screen. And it didn't. And the reason it hasn't yet is because I haven't done anything with I. So I need to include this I somewhere. So what I want I to be is I want actually I to be the position of the ellipse, the x position of the ellipse. So actually I should have said this to 24 instead of, and I'm going to put the I here. Okay, so I'm not sure if